Between now and the NFL draft, the Vikings' needs are going to change. So what needs will they still have come April? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Today on the show, no beating around the bush. I have a long conversation with Tyler Forness. We started talking about the Vikings draft needs, and he's got a couple players in mind for who could fill those draft needs. A lineman he likes, both offensive, defensive, a corner he likes. Tyler is a dear friend of mine. He went to the Senior Bowl, and he's been covering the draft for years. But we also kind of talked about what it's like to cover the draft, what it's like to get players wrong, which we've both done plenty of. Anybody who covers the draft has, and how to try to avoid that in the future. Kind of steered into this really awesome direction. I recorded it earlier this week, so I'm excited to share that with you. So without further ado, here is Tyler Forness. All right, everybody, welcome in Tyler Forness, Senior Bowl attendee, draft aficionado, and guy who disagrees with me. We'll do that later. But hey, Tyler, how you doing?
I'm doing a lot better than what we were supposed to talk last week, Luke.
Yeah.
You're not my friend anymore, I guess.
Be careful with oysters in Alabama. So here's what I want to do today. We have some draft needs, right? And I want to do the draft needs thing. Now, I think it's pretty ubiquitously known that the Vikings needs, corner, D-tackle, guard, are like everybody corner, like those are the four, right? Everybody pretty much agrees that those are the four things that they need. Maybe a running back or a backup QB or whatever. There's all those other ones, but those are like your off-season priorities, call it your kind of big four. But I want you to tell me, A, if you even agree with that, and B, what you think the draft needs are, because some of those are going to be more free agency needs than draft needs. So first, tell me, let's start talking about the Vikings kind of draft need by draft need. So what is the biggest draft? When we show up in April, what is going to be the position we're looking at closest?
I think
pick one.
With a bullet, it's secondary. And I don't think it's really that close, where if you pick one individual singular needs, secondary might not be the most important. But when you talk about the future of the franchise, youth is going to be so important in that secondary position. And it was one of the big things that bit us in the butt at the end of the year. Yeah. You have guys like Stephon Gilmore and Shaquille Griffin who just can't play man coverage. And that limits you in what you can do. And when you ask them to play man coverage, they're going to be able to get torched. And those little nuances, plus with those zone blitzes that they like to do with the fire blitzes where they're running 3 up, 3 down or 3 up, 2 down, they're torching. And you have guys like Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford who can beat that stuff. So getting youth in the secondary is really important. Plus, they just don't have any right now. You know, you have
there's just no guys under they've got like 3 guys under contract. Yeah.
You invested 2 picks in Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth Jr., who just didn't work out. Caleb Evans worked out for about 16 games, and then he floundered, and now he's with the Carolina Panthers.
Right. Which is fine for a 4, by the way. Like, that works. If you got starting out of but that's a 4th, right? Like, that's not supposed to be your guy.
And I think that's where Vikings fans need to adjust. And I know you've talked about this a lot. Adjust what a draft hit is. Caleb Evans is a draft hit. You got 16 games as a starter.
That's a great litmus test. Like, how do you feel about the Caleb Evans pick? Because that is you did get value.
Jalen Naylor's drafted for that sense too. Like,
that's
you have
slam
2
dunk
hits
for a 5th. Yeah,
absolutely. You could argue Nick Muse for the limited amount he played was a draft hit because he was a 7th round guy.
Did he ever like truly make the team, or was he always like a practice squad elevation? Because my thing is like you got to make the 53.
He made it last year, and then he made it this year, but he did bounce down a couple times.
Once Hawkinson came back, he bounced down. So it's but like borderline. Yeah,
your mileage may vary on that, but
sure.
You need youth in the secondary because unfortunately Kyrie Jackson passed away, and you have Mekhi Blackman who's coming off a torn ACL. There just isn't youth in that secondary. And Byron Murphy, he's about to turn 27. He's a free agent. So you have Dwight McGlothern and you have Mekhi Blackman. That's it. Cam Bynum's a free agent. Josh Metellus is he's probably about 28 now, which is fine, but it's not super young. You want to find a way to get youth in that room. So I think secondary is going to be the number one spot. But where are you attacking?
He just turned
that secondary?
27, by the way.
Okay. So I was a year away. That's my bad. But
yeah.
and
I think he's under contract for a couple more years too. So I do feel like we can probably look at Metellus as like a long-term piece. But let's turn back to the draft though. And so let's say they bring back Byron Murphy. I would love to see it. Let's hope a little. Let's wish and say, okay, you've got Byron Murphy, you got whatever you get from Mekhi Blackman, you got a couple of these other young guys, McLaughlins and guys that can be your depth, whatever. But I'm with you. You need like a man corner, like a guy that allows you to play cover one, close down the middle of the field, and beat some of these, especially the Ben Johnson offense, which attacks the middle of the field so well. And now they're going to be doing that in Chicago. So who's that guy? Let's if they're walking in, who is that guy? And I would love it if it's a Senior Bowl standout. I mentioned a couple corners on Friday, but I just kind of threw a couple out there. But like who's the corner?
If you are drafting in round one, it's probably Siobhan Revel Jr. out of East Carolina. And one of the interesting things about Revel is he tore his ACL in practice at the end of September, but he was Dane Brugler's 12th overall player going into that injury. The dude is awesome. He's nearly 6'2". He's got like 32, 33 inch arms. He's super athletic, really fast, great ball skills. And when he played Michigan, which is the only really great competition he played over the last 2 years, played really, really well. That is, if let's put it this way, if Pete Carroll had his way, he would have been on the Legion of Boom. That's the kind of player he is. Just an absolute freak athletically. Like the idea of what Richard Sherman is, but with speed. And I'm not copying him to Richard Sherman, but you can kind of get the picture in your head of what Sherman was able to do, the way he was able to close down zones in that cover three and be able to just attack the football in the air and close out space. Like that's what Revel's going to be able to do, but he can also play man coverage. The one Senior Bowl guy that I'm absolutely obsessed with, Luke, and I think you've heard me talk about him before, Quincy Riley out of Louisville. Teammates of Jarvis Brownlee Jr. last year. He was a 5th round guy. I had him as a 2nd, and he was really good against Justin Jefferson in that Titans game. Quincy Riley's better. I almost have a 1st round grade on him. This dude might be the best, my favorite prospect I've ever watched. Not best, but favorite. I love this dude.
Your highest versus. So where does everybody else have him? Are you like super high on him then?
I'm high. He's probably like a consensus day 2 guy. Probably more.
And you're saying day 1.
I'm saying fringe day 1. I love
day
him.
1. Okay.
He's 5'10" and a half, 193 pounds. He can play nickel. He can play outside. And he's incredibly fast and aggressive. And he's got tremendous ball skills. 13 interceptions, 34 passes defended, over 1,600 snaps in pass coverage over the course of his career. He's a little older. He's 24. Spent 3 years at Middle Tennessee State and then 3 years at Louisville. But he's got all the experience. He's got the knowledge. He's got the athleticism. And I asked him about it because his feet kind of look like they're in quicksand when he's playing off man. But then when he explodes out of his break, it's like they're not in quicksand anymore. And he has a great and quick trigger, understands what's happening in front of him, and then can go attack it. And he's got really poor instincts against the run, but he's got a lot of effort. So I think you can teach that. You can't teach effort. Okay. I can teach you how to take a better angle. That would be the guy where I'm planting my flag in this class. And if that guy ends up a Viking, it might be Jaron Hall 2.0 again. I might cry.
Oh no. That's not, we don't need to talk about what we said about Jaron Hall. Okay, Tyler. Okay, so if that's the room, right? Mekhi Blackman, Byron Murphy, and Quincy Riley. We don't have a corner over 6 foot, which might be an interesting issue. If we have to play like the Buccaneers or something, and Mike Evans is out there, whoever everybody's tall receiver is, but that is also pales in comparison to the secondary issues we had before. I want to get more into prospects and stuff with you and maybe debate a little bit about the efficacy of the Senior Bowl at all. So we will get into that in just a second. Back with Tyler in a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The big game is here. Super Bowl 59, 1 game, 2 teams, all kinds of things can happen. whether it's predicting the first touchdown, putting together a wacky, wild parlay with 49 legs in it. I know you all love to do that, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. If you're real messed up about it, you can even bet in the middle of the game from kickoff to the final whistle. All the thrills are on FanDuel. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what's going on the field. Even if it's a blowout, the spread will move with you so you can still bet on will there be a comeback or not. It's a Mahomes game, right? Of course, that's something you're keeping an eye on. So download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, every single day. Here with Tyler Forness, you can catch the Real Forno Show. What else are you up? What else? Plug all your other stuff right now.
Yeah, the Real Forno Show and Vikings First and Skull podcast feed and YouTube channel. We're cool just like you are, Luke. And then all my written stuff is at A to Z Sports. I do some stuff with Score North, but as of right now, on a little bit of a hiatus for a reset for draft season, essentially.
Sure. So let's say, Tyler, that the Vikings address corner in free agency entirely. Let's say they bring back Byron Murphy and they go out and they get like DJ Reed, or then like that's their splash of free agency, right? You're okay, we're not drafting a corner anymore. And let's get off the secondary entirely. And because if they have those three corners, they bring back Bynum, and you're not feeling like, I don't think you need to have 6 superstars in the secondary. You need 5, whether it's 2 safeties and 3 corners or vice versa, like whatever. Yeah. So let's look elsewhere and maybe a little more at the trenches. Was there anybody, especially at the Senior Bowl, that caught your eye in the trenches?
I really like the guy you brought up on your Friday show last week, Luke. Was it
Darius
Toledo guy, Darius?
Yeah, Darius Alexander's the Toledo
Alexander.
guy.
Yeah, that dude's got a real pass rush mode or something. And one of the things that, because I cover the Vikings full time, I go in somewhat blind on these guys. I don't have full tape studies done. I do most of my tape study from January on. So I've seen these guys play college ball, and I kind of understand a little bit about what they are. But coming in blind, I think, gives me a little bit of a fresher perspective. And then I like to use that to contextualize the tape when I go back. Like, okay, how real was this? Is he showing this in games? Is he showing this against lesser competition, which he's going to have in the MAC? But how he was winning, how he was using his length, how he was beating guys on both the outside and the inside, plus with his acumen and run defense at the college level, like, this dude has probably made himself like a top 50-ish pick. And because one of the things about the Senior Bowl is guys who play lower levels get to contextualize what they can do against better competition, which is one of the reasons why they really focus on bringing in smaller school guys, because it gives them that opportunity. And we've seen guys like Josh Allen take advantage of it, and all of a sudden Allen goes top 10. Like, it's not a fail-safe thing, but it does help you understand a little better. And I think Alexander did a tremendous job. Walter Nolan is a guy. I've heard a lot of things that might take him kind of away from what the Vikings potentially might want. I've heard a lot of negative things. That's about all I can say on that. But the play is outstanding. They at Ole Miss, they asked him to slant and stunt a lot, and he can do that. He can play like a wide 9, and he can get pressure, which I think is really impressive. He had some interesting reps when you get to...
But he's an inside guy. It's just that they put him there because he's twitchy. He's just that quick off the ball. Yeah.
He was taking it to Will Campbell, the LSU offensive tackle, who probably goes top 10 as an edge rusher. So because they asked him to do a lot of those things, that would translate immediately to what the Minnesota Vikings do.
And so the thing with Walter Nolan, we talked about this on Friday too, was is that he's 293 pounds but quick off the ball. But the question, like, you got to be more than big to be good at the run, right? Like, there have been plenty of big guys that suck against the run. So can he play the run, or is he going to be more of like, is this guy getting drafted to be a pass rusher, or is he the true all around package that is going to go? Because if he's that, then he's going to go top 15.
I think you're drafting this guy as a pass rusher, but he's also not a liability in the run game. You've talked about it, Luke, where like these pass rushers are kind of interchangeable. You're taking these guys in round 3, round 4 if they're like specialist kind of guys, like the Milton Williams of the world.
Right. Yeah, you're not spending a first round pick on a guy that only comes in on third downs. Yeah.
No, he's not coming in on third downs. You can keep him in on first and second down and you can feel comfortable. He's not going to be an elite bully like Jonathan Bullard, but I think you can put him in Jerry Tillery's spot and he's going to acquit himself just fine. He's never going to be a liability in the run game, but he is really talented, and that ability to rush the passer really gives you an extra element that this team just does not have.
So, all right, you hinted at it. Let's get into it, because I said, I talked to you on Friday about the Senior Bowl and how I kind of don't think, or I think we should be careful. I guess that's the way I want to put it, right? Like, especially with one-on-ones, they can lie to you, and the like, you said it's quantifiable. I'm really curious as to what you mean about that, but you just kind of disagree with my point entirely. So go, Cook.
So I don't disagree with you completely, but I do think it's more valuable than you do. I think from an evaluator perspective, without a lot, like I don't have a lot of inside sources yet. I'm still trying to build up a network. I don't have team sources like a lot of people do. So I really look at film and try to listen to people I believe are smart. So I take the Senior Bowl as about 10% of the draft process. You want to be able to see these guys in an all-star setting, and a lot of the stuff does not come across in like film grades. You want to see how they handle themselves. You want to see how they handle a completely unique situation, because these practices are weird. You have like 3,000 people watching you practice, and the practices are structured completely different from what you would see in a normal college practice. And
yeah, they're like one-on-one tests. Like,
yeah. And you're going up against guys who are probably playing better competition if you're not like from the Floridas, Alabamas, and Texases of the world. So that element gives you a little bit of a different thing. It's an all-star kind of coaching staff where they're taking guys like Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator for the Giants, is a head coach of one team. So they're still trying to figure out how to run things. First practice is always really weird. The second practice is usually the best one. And the third practice is usually focused strictly on one-on-one type drills. So quantifying how they're winning. Is this translatable to an NFL game? Because like all these TikTok routes that these wide receivers are running, none of them translate because they'll just get punched off the line.
Yeah, right. You just spend like 40 minutes releasing. That's what gets me. That like people look at that and see that as the most evaluative thing. I think you've made a great point about the sort of off field, the between the reps, how they carry themselves, the body language, how they respond to coaching. You know, and when it's Mike Kafka, when your offensive coordinator is there and says, yeah, I told him to do this and he didn't really listen to me, like that's great information. But nobody talks about that, you know?
No.
That's not what the story of the Senior Bowl is, which means as an outside, I wasn't there. As an outside guy, what can I get from it?
And I think that's an important thing. There's so much that we don't know. And you know what? It's okay to say that you don't know. And I think we need a little bit more of that in media, because if I don't know, I'm just going to tell you. I don't know. And you know what? That's okay. Should I know? Maybe. And I think you can criticize me for that, but you're never going to criticize me for lying to you. And I think that to me is more important.
I'll find a way. Don't worry, Tab.
But I do think using these kind of elements and measuring it against tape. Tape is, to me, like 70% of the process. 10% of it's the combine, and 10% of it is everything else that a prospect will do, whether it be interviews, whether it be like how the agent helps them out. But your tape is what's going to win you things. It's going to be your bread and butter. And if I see a guy like last year, I talked about how I love Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I had never watched him play before the Senior Bowl. I'm like, who is this guy? This guy rocks. And then I went back and looked at his tape, and the tape matched everything I saw, and I was completely sold. But sometimes it doesn't match at all. And then you have to use that as a different quantifiable tool. Okay, why didn't I see that in college? Can I gain anything from what I saw at the Senior Bowl? Is it different from what he was asked to do in college? And now he's getting to show off a different skill set that wasn't tapped into. And I think using these drills and using this experience to go back and match it with what the tape was is just an extra piece to the puzzle. If you say, oh, Tez Johnson from Oregon, that's a first-round pick. That dude is smaller than Tutu Atwell. He is going to get bullied off the line of scrimmage. He's not Tank Dell. Tank Dell is a one-of-one, in my opinion. He was a special type of receiver because not only was he small, but he was able to get quickness and separation and win vertically consistently. at a high level in college football. And we saw that with the Houston Texans. He was able to continue that.
Yeah, against big corners. You want to see them like come with a solution to their own problems is something that I say a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And seeing Tez Johnson, he was so great in Senior Bowl. Sure. He was great in those practices because a guy who's 5'9", 156 pounds with great speed and quickness should win all of those drills. They should. But once he gets to the NFL, like his average depth of target this year was 5.5 yards in an offense with Dylan Gabriel, where they do like to try and push it a little bit downfield. They pushed it more downfield this year than they did with Bo Nix. Like he's only used as their gadget guy when they have other guys on the outside who they trust more with the vertical concepts. So when you look at all those
receiver,
when you look at all those factors, like I don't believe Tez Johnson is going to be a great pro. I think he's like a wide receiver 4 kind of gadgety guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's where you talk about the one-on-ones being overvalued. You're 100% right. It's because the people who are overvaluing them don't quite understand what they're looking at. And sometimes I don't quite understand what I'm looking at. You know what I do? I ask people who are smarter than me, what am I looking at? What am I missing? And then with that added context, then I can form a better opinion.
Yeah, we've stumbled into a really interesting kind of philosophical thing about like how to figure out a draft prospect, and I do want to follow that thread. We did not plan this at all, but I want to follow that thread, so we'll do that in a second. We'll be right back with Tyler to talk about that, but first, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? If that story involves self-improvement, maybe think about getting into therapy. Therapy is something I recommend for everyone, and if you have had some trouble getting involved, BetterHelp, that's what it's there for, to help you get hooked up with a therapist that's right for you. You can find your journey of personal growth, and if that person isn't right for you, no big deal. You can switch at any time for no additional charge. So write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, we're back here with Tyler Forness. Tyler, how long have you been covering the draft in a even semi-professional capacity?
Since 2020.
2020. Okay.
I infamously liked Denzel Mims more than Justin Jefferson.
Nice.
He sold me. Yeah, it was.
There we go. I think I had him in the same tier. I can't talk. But so this is a thing for me, and I know you know this, but for me in the draft, I always want to look back anything more than 2 years ago and be like, what an idiot. Mm-hmm. Like, I always want to look at what I thought, back in 2022. I liked Lewis Cine. I didn't like Andrew Booth, so I went 1-1 there. But I'd like all of those draft takes and be like, wow, that guy was stupid, because that means that I've learned enough. I've evolved enough to know how, like I was missing there. So when you want to, we can joke about, 2021 O-line takes that I had about Elijah Vera Tucker or whatever. I didn't like Christian Darrisaw coming out. And that's fine. I feel like I've learned the right lesson from that. We can move on, but I don't know. We've stumbled into an interesting thing about like how to, not just what to know, because there is just an infinite landscape of knowledge in football that nobody has mastered. You can listen to Jim McNally, who probably is the one human on the earth right now who is alive and knows the most about O-line. Like, that's probably the guy. And even he would be like, well, I learned this guy from this, 35-year-old OC today. Like everybody, there's so much knowledge in football that I think it's impossible for any single person to wrap their head all the way around it, which is why it gets frustrating for me when people act like they have all the answers because they put a positional value matrix together. It's like, you don't even know how much you don't know. Mm-hmm. And navigating in that world, you're flying blind, trying to come up with an opinion on, is this guy good? There is this, there has to be this humility of, I could be just whiffing here. Mm-hmm. Like, even on ones you and I were super confident about, like Chop Robinson last year, which looks like it's going well. Mm-hmm. But even us, like, we still have to go into even like that is the surest I've ever been about a guy. But I still have to be like, but there is always the chance that I'm an idiot. And that in 2 years, I'm going to look back at my Chop Robinson eval and go, holy crap, I didn't know what I was looking at all. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so like, how do you navigate that?
Well, you just have to go in it with humility, be willing to admit when you're wrong, which I think I'm pretty good at, but nobody's perfect. I mean, let's just get the cat out of the bag. I was really wrong about Jamar Chase, and I'm okay with why.
Oh, I thought you were
going
to bring up Quentin Johnston. I'm sorry.
Nope.
I don't need to pile on.
Quentin Johnston's problem is he just can't catch. He does everything else well.
Well, it's in the name.
Yeah. But my big thing with Jamar Chase was it did not feel to me he was this elite athlete on his LSU tape. And I think some of that had to do with just what they were asking him to do. And how
it's tough when you're next to Justin Jefferson too. And it's like, well, these guys don't even look that different from each other. And we just didn't realize, well, they kind of,
Yeah. And
we just didn't realize the matrix we were on.
I was worried with his size that physicality element that he has just would not translate to the NFL at a level where he was projected to be a top 5 pick. So I had him at the end of round 1. And people make fun of me because I had him in the same like stratosphere as Dwayne Eskridge. And I did.
Oh, buddy.
But Chase was 1 point above Eskridge on my scale.
Hey, it's 2021. It doesn't count. It doesn't count anymore.
Yeah. But I learned that not everybody who's a great contested catch guy is the same. Not every contested catch is created equal. And how they go about those contested catches. Because N'Keal Harry was a great contested catch guy. But why was he a great contested catch guy? And looking back on his draft and why he failed in the NFL, and why Chase succeeded, being able to contextualize both of those has helped me moving forward. And
it's the Drake London lesson for me. Because the reason he was a contested catch guy is because he had an idiot quarterback that couldn't throw. And he had to keep coming back to the ball. And I thought the same thing happened with Addison at USC. Don't look up who his quarterback was. But
hey, we were both lower on him than most people. And I still feel good about that. But then
people made fun of me. Y'all should have let me cook.
Then I look back at that same draft class and I was in love with 2 guys, and I am so glad I loved them. I loved Christian Darrisaw, and I thought it was an issue with Virginia Tech just didn't want him to bury anybody because nobody else on that offensive line did. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's a coaching thing. And then I loved Creed Humphrey on the live draft stream I did. I did all 3 days, every single pick, the entire day 2 until he got picked. I was screaming at the Vikings to trade up for Creed Humphrey. This is the guy. If you still want to have Bradbury start at center, just put him at guard. This is the dude. The only thing I could find negative on him, he was left-handed, and he snaps the ball kind of funky. Just like a left-footed punter, you can get used to that. And
that's just not been an issue.
Yeah, just looking back at why you were right and why you were wrong can help you moving forward. But like you said, not every prospect is going to be a linear evaluation. Just because this guy,
everybody's a different guy. And we do the comp thing so much. Yeah. Like I hate draft comps so much. For me, when I do a draft comp, I try to like get an idea, right? Where I'm like, well, this guy is, like what if Jamar Chase was bad? And like, that would be my comp for a thing where it's like, stylistically, it's like this, but he sucks because like that would be the deal. But we do the comparison thing so much because I think we want to root it back into familiarity, and it can be like a useful tool for that. But it also just like reduces, when you say, oh, well, this edge rush every year I hear, oh, well, this guy is the next Myles Garrett. No, he isn't. No. And what the difference is between those two guys might actually be more informative than just saying, hey, think of him kind of like Myles Garrett, which is just a kind of a shorthand that I feel like we are so like you guys like you and I are so deep into it that we don't need those shorthands. We don't need to be in a hurry here. We got hundreds of guys. We've got months to do this. We don't need to be like, just like and for me, I don't feel a need to do every guy. I know that you try to be more comprehensive in your content, but like I will probably get really deep into like 25 dudes, and I'll pick the right positions for the Vikings, and I'll pick how they are. And, I'll try to target guys that are going to be around when the Vikings pick and stuff, and try to like do that. But that's just the process that I don't have 350 guys in me. I can't do it fast and still feel like I'm doing it well. But like, I think the thing you said about like you have to learn the right lessons is so important, and you have to have humility, right? Like if you're just still sitting there caping for guys that you love. Like if you were still sitting there going, here's how Denzel Mims can still work out. Like, you would be one of those like people on Twitter everyone makes fun of, right?
Hey,
so
look,
you can't
Denzel
do
Mims
that.
could be an all UFL player tomorrow, I believe.
All right, yeah. So let's go Argonauts. Let's do it. But like, I think that's the deal, and I think it's this combination of, for me, the draft is a chance to learn the position. When I'm looking at last year, when I looked at quarterbacks as deeply as I ever have, because the Vikings were going to draft one, I added so much knowledge about quarterbacks that I did not have before, about how their bodies are supposed to twist and turn, about, where's your elbow supposed to be when you throw a ball, right? Like I know that now. I did not know that this time last year. I was probably learning it about this time last year. And so for me, right or wrong on the draft pick, if I learned something, I'm happy. If I learned what something is supposed to be, I'm happy. Even if I got a little bit too, I missed on Jared Verse because I got a little bit too clinic pilled, I think. I focused on a couple things I learned on clinics too much that didn't really apply to him. And then I didn't really I didn't really see what I was supposed to see on his tape. But at the same time, those same bits of knowledge made me right on Braden Fisk. So it helped, but I got a little bit overfed. I got to zoom back out and refocus. But it's a difficult world to navigate. But I think whether you're a content creator or you're just somebody who's like a fan, like if you're just a listener to this show that likes the draft, that just wants to be, more informed about football, I think there's something to be proud of as long as you're continuing to improve yourself. The takes will come, right? Like the hits will come if you yourself are improving. Maybe that's life advice.
No, that's great advice, because one of the big things with the NFL draft is NFL teams are bad at this.
Yeah.
Draft analysts are bad at this.
Nobody's good at it because there's so much stuff that happens in a draft pick that messes you up, right? Like everything that Lewis Seen did in college did not happen in the NFL. How are you supposed to predict that? Right? How are you supposed to look at him? Like one of the things about him in college was that he was heady, that he knew what he was looking at. And he was really like a well-learned guy. And that turned out to be like the thing that undid him in the NFL. And the only way to predict that is to look at him doing the right things. It's either to misdiagnose and say he was doing the wrong things and then get lucky, or to look at him doing the right things and saying, yeah, but I just don't believe that it will happen, and kind of baselessly make that and get lucky. So yeah, I guess that kind of sums it up. And I think the Lewis Seen lesson can be what is the Lewis Seen lesson? Let's wrap it up with that. What do you think the Lewis Seen lesson is for people like the Vikings or people who just liked the pick but then ended up wrong?
The Lewis Seen lesson is twofold. One, I think you have to contextualize what they're doing in college a little better, because that Georgia defense, and we saw why a guy like Travon Walker, who was selected first overall in that draft, had a slow start. They asked him to do one thing, and he was great at that one thing. But the idea was he had never really developed the full package. He never learned how to rush the passer. This year, he had over 10 sacks.
Yeah, he's good now. People missed it because it's the Jaguars, but he is good now.
He is good. And people are just drooling over Aiden Hutchinson because of the PFF thing. And honestly, I don't think Hutchinson's that good. He's kind of a one-trick pony. I think he's good, but he's not great.
Well, be careful. You're wading into, you're going to get wars now. I'm with you. But
are you kidding? You should see my mentions sometimes. I still hear about Malik Willis and stuff. It's I don't care. As a draft analyst, you're going to bat 300 at best, and that's pretty good. I'll take that any day. But he wasn't asked to do a whole lot. He was basically asked to be a point and trigger kind of guy, where he crashed downhill a lot. And they were asked to do very simplistic things within that Kirby Smart scheme. And two, you cannot predict a devastating, debilitating injury. And then the third point, don't draft for a specific scheme like that. Because if you have to change that scheme within a year like they did, it can completely derail an entire class.
Especially when it's the side of the ball your head coach is not on. Like Zimmer could draft for Zimmer, but Zimmer probably shouldn't be drafting for, Norv Turner, because John DeFilippo might show up and Pat Shurmur might show up. That makes a lot of sense. I never really thought about it in the context of don't draft scheme specific on the opposite side of the ball as your head coach.
Yeah. I still think Booth was a great value pick. I had that guy top 15 in that class. I loved him. I loved him. Lewisine, I was pretty agnostic on, but he just kept getting injured and he just never put it together. Sometimes that happens.
And there's always going to be that attachment with Kyle Hamilton too, because they could have, and then they decided to like value it and like to like value pill it. And Kwesi is on record that he regrets that in that particular, like, yeah, we tried to like do it all at once and trade down and get it too much. And it's like, we probably just shit at Occam's razor and take the good player. But
yeah,
I've taken up enough of your time, Tyler. So should we announce what we want to do here? Are we in? Is this happening?
Do it.
So, throughout all of draft season, we are going to have on Locked On Vikings Forno Fridays. Forno is going to come on here and on Fridays and give us, whether it's one or two or three segments, guy you've been watching, something you've been thinking about, philosophical draft musings. We're going to have conversations like this a lot. So look forward to it on Locked On Vikings. Tyler, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks a whole bunch for hanging out with me and Tyler. Excited to get into like the Forno Fridays thing later on in the off season. But for now, we got one more until the Super Bowl. We're going to keep talking about draft stuff though, because the Vikings aren't in the Super Bowl. So we're doing our own thing. I'll see y'all for that. And as always, Skull.